Brothers, good evening. So we are finally back again after a long-awaited wait for the IBA Spotlight Series, where we bring on a past IBA from long ago or even recent, and we kind of spotlight their accomplishments and what they've done since they won the IBA and how the award has impacted them and the trajectory of their life. So I'm Kellen Brown. I am the 2023 IBA winner. I'm joined by brother Grant Franko, who was the 2022 IBA winner, and then our most recent IBA as well, brother David Cathey from Texas Tech. And we are all super honored to be joined by brother John Meinen, who is the IBA winner from Bradley University in 2006. So thank you all so much for being here, and thank you so much, especially John, for joining us. And so we'll jump straight into our first question. Brother Meinen, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, what you do, hobbies, family, things like that.
Great, and thank you. And thanks for having me and having this series and inviting me to be a part of it. I don't know if I qualify as one of the more recent or one of the far back. It's been, if you can believe it, almost 20 years now, and that doesn't even seem real. But I grew up very close to where I went to school. I grew up in central Illinois, and I attended Bradley University, which is in Peoria, Illinois, very close to my hometown. And it's actually where my dad and my sister went to school. So I kind of attended in somewhere I was very connected to, which I really loved. There was even a field named after our family there, at conveniently John Meinen Field. So, I adopted that right away as just, I think I knew I wanted to go to Bradley at a young age. But I attended camps there. I was a kid who was involved in speech and forensics, and I also attended their Summer of Wonder as a kid, right? So I grew up not really thinking I would be a Sigma Chi or knowing I would be a Sigma Chi at Bradley, but there was something about Bradley University kind of that was in my roots. And I had a really great childhood in the Midwest. And really, I kind of kept those roots with me. I moved after college out here to New Jersey. That's where I'm currently located. So I've been in New Jersey for law school. I went to Seton Hall University Law School. I moved here in the fall of 2006. So really, like, win the award, finish the summer, move for law school. And I've stayed put on the East Coast ever since. So for about the last 17 years, I've been living in Jersey City, New Jersey. You tell people you moved to New York, but it's like people who are from Chicago, you're like, yeah, I've actually lived in New Jersey. So Jersey City is right across the Hudson from New York. And I'm not the only Midwesterner here. Jersey City is kind of a diverse crossroads. But when I moved to New York and the New Jersey area, people could tell right away that I wasn't from New Jersey. They would ask me that a lot. So I very much kind of adapted the line from Bob Dylan. I told people that the country I come from is called the Midwest. And it really was different. It was different values. It was a different pace. Where I grew up, you honked your car horn to say hello to someone, or if you recognized them, you didn't like actually honk your horn because somebody waited too long at a green light. So visiting New York and being in the New York area, people could tell right away I was not from here. When my older brother Ben was visiting me once, a guy stopped him on the street and said, "Hey, you're not from here." And he was like, a little offended. And the guy told him that we need to walk around like we just got punched in the stomach. That way, everybody will know you look like you're from New Jersey. And it kind of sat with me. I thought that was that's an interesting thing. So I've been happily transplanted here in Jersey City now. For 17 years. It's been wonderful. And I live with my partner, Caleb, here in Jersey City. We have a 6-month-old Australian Shepherd puppy. So I don't know how many of you are dog lovers, but Australian Shepherd puppy has been a lot of fun and also a lot of work. His name's Dexter. We also have a really large family of nieces and nephews. We don't have any kids yet, but young. I'm only 40, so not going to close that door yet. Besides, who I am, I work every day as an attorney. I practice law in New York and New Jersey. I started my career actually in criminal law. So my first job right out of law school was as a criminal clerk here in the county court system. And then I went to work right away in a defense firm doing criminal defense work. And I got to say to, anyone who's out there wondering if they're going to go to law school, if they want to be a lawyer, do it, get that experience. As a criminal defense attorney, I learned just a great amount about right and wrong, about people. And I worked with a really stellar trial lawyer named Peter Willis. He taught me an incredible amount defending matters. You know, I worked in state and federal court. I got to touch kind of a lot of things. We had a high profile case out here where Chris Christie, when he was U.S. attorney in New Jersey, had an informant wear a wire and bribe 44 different individuals. And I represented one of those individuals in federal court. And we were one of two people who was actually acquitted in federal court. You know, it was a great first experience as a lawyer. And I knew coming out of coming out of Bradley rather, that I wanted to be a lawyer, that I wanted to be an advocate, and I wanted to help people. I cut my teeth in criminal law, and then I moved into civil law. So I moved over to the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. It's an organization kind of unlike any other. I spent 10 years as a litigator, so now just doing civil work, including 5 of those years as a labor and employment attorney for Metro North Railroad. And I was fortunate to get just a diverse range of experience trying criminal cases, civil cases. I got to handle my own appeals. I got to go to the appellate courts. I got to argue at the Second Circuit, things that trial lawyers would love to do. And I don't have enough trials to call myself a trial lawyer, but I say I was a litigator. And that's really something that appealed to me. A lot of people go on to be lawyers. There's 1,000 jokes written about lawyers. But being a useful lawyer, somebody who can actually work in the system and understand what's at stake, that's what I always wanted to be. So about 5 years ago, after getting that diverse experience and working in criminal law and then civil law, I moved into a brand new practice. I moved into ethics and compliance law. And now I'm back at the Port Authority, and I report to the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer. My title is actually Legal Management Executive. And what is unique about my job now, and I think what really appeals to me is where so much of my time before was spent just on whether something was legal, right? That's where you stopped. Your analysis was almost like right and wrong ended at, is it legal? And for a criminal defense attorney, you'd be surprised at how many things that, the law is often nebulous in some regards. And, when you have criminal defendants who just maybe did it, but it can't be proven, you look at the law a little differently. The practice I have now in ethics, it asks an additional question. Something doesn't have to just be legal or illegal. It has to also be right. So we add this like normative lens that wasn't there before, that is kind of lost in your discussion of, being a lawyer and whether you get somebody off on a technicality. So we get to talk a lot about what the law should be. What is fairness? What is integrity? And what is equity? And dealing with those topics on an everyday basis, for me, that's like, it's the law kind of on steroids. It's how things should be. So now, I'm not in the courtroom every day. Instead, I spend my time training our employees. We have 9,000 employees at the Port Authority. So I do employee training. I also write the employee codes of ethics. So we have an employee code of ethics, a vendor code of ethics, a lessee code of ethics. I'm the principal author of those now in my job. So I do legal research and I write the actual corporate policies. The Port Authority is pretty central to New York City life if you're out here. So we operate all the bridges, we operate the tunnels, the port, the World Trade Center is our headquarters. And it's an immense organization and it's really unique. So every day, like I'm not touching the same issue every day. It is just something that, kind of keeps me on my toes. And I think the connection maybe back to Sigma Chi and what's so unique to it is, the Port Authority's been around for a while, over 100 years, not as old as Sigma Chi. But like any good organization, we often have to go back to what our values actually are. And recently, within the last 10 years of the Port Authority, we really restated what makes the agency work. And we did an exercise where we had to come out with our standards, right? What are our standards at this agency? And the number one standard is integrity. So it's just like our core values. I have found a deep connection to my work because, the work is important, but it's actually how you do the work that matters even more when you practice ethics and compliance law. So outside of law and everything else and having a puppy, I'm also a moot court coach at Seton Hall Law School. That's kind of a 1-hour course that I teach with another lawyer friend. And we help students write a Supreme Court brief and then craft their oral arguments for competition. So there's actually a whole world out there where law schools write fake briefs to answer fake legal problems and then go have fake courtroom dramas. When I was an undergrad, I did a lot of speech and debate. Forensics was a huge part of who I was growing up. And there really isn't an outlet for that in law school. There's mock trial, but then there's appellate argument. And appellate argument is like the principled argument. You have to prepare usually 15 minutes on each argument. So you're writing 30 minutes of oral argument and you're answering questions from a bench. I have loved doing that. It has appealed to, again, this kind of sense of being an advocate. And Seton Hall's program has grown. We've become nationally ranked. And last year I had a national champion in my competition. So I'm really proud of the students I get to work with. Outside of all of those work, with any remaining free time, we like to hike. We like to take our dog hiking. In the last kind of 6 months, we visited some of our favorite places in Wisconsin and Kentucky with him. He's an amazing road dog. He's been to Buffalo Trace twice. I mean, already at 6 months, he's handling tours. So, and we love being fun uncles. Like I said, we have 8 nieces and nephews, and we really just, between work and life, I mean, it really fills the time. So that's probably more than you needed, but a little bit about me and what I do.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's like, I think your background is just so cool. I'm also super interested in law, but I will say, it's so funny. Grand Consul Wilson is just like not a fan of the law profession at all, makes jokes about it all the time. So I am actively working to recruit as many soon-to-be law students as possible. But we'll get there. It's a work in progress. I'll pass it to Grant for the next question.
Yeah, I think Grand Consul Wilson would definitely find your perspective on the value of law refreshing. So that's wonderful. Yeah, I actually am living in Philadelphia right now, so I'm pretty close to you. I used to work for a company based out of Wisconsin, so I definitely know that difference between the Midwest and the East Coast here, how the people are. So yeah. So talking a little bit about your experience as an undergrad, can you tell us about what are some of your memories of Sigma Chi as an undergraduate at Bradley, and how do you look back on that time?
I think my fondest memories really, and it may be you caught somebody from Bradley who lived in what we called the old house, but a lot of my fondest memories center on this house we had, 821 Glenwood, which was this old house before it was sold and torn down. And there's something just almost irreplaceable about 40 guys living together in this place. I mean, it was in terms of proximity to campus, Bradley is like a postage stamp. So it's tiny, it's in the middle of Peoria, and there's only like one quad, or there was when I was there, and our house was like adjacent to the quad. We were all by ourselves. It was us, Sigma Chi Omega was next door, and there were no other fraternities or sororities on our side of campus. And we had this Greek revival house that was built, the turn of the around 1910, 1915, and it had beautiful pillars and a 2-story balcony, and it looked like a fraternity house, right? It just had this character, this classical character. And I moved in freshman year, which is somewhat unheard of, I think, these days. I don't know, pledgeship is different these days as well, but I moved in second semester still as a pledge second semester. So pledgeship lasted from the fall to March for us when I went through. And now I know that's obviously been replaced with our really great program, our preparation for brotherhood. But there was something different about that process. And then being so new in the house, surrounded by all of these upperclassmen, and the house basically became life. And I think one of the greatest traditions that I took away from that, I mean, I think everybody who's lived in that experience, you take away different things. For some people, it's the social experience. For some people, it's like, they've never had that many roommates. It's getting along with that many different personalities. But there was one little flair that I've not seen another chapter really do it this way. Our annotator, in addition to taking all the minutes and doing all of the duties, had another responsibility. They had to be a cartoonist because every week the chapter would vote on a SIG of the week and a knob of the week. And no matter what the tale was, whoever our collective hero or our collective zero was at the time, right, there was always a lesson behind it. So it was never meant to put anybody down, but it was always meant to kind of take another way, almost satirical way to view our values through something the brothers did. So after chapter, when the SIG and the knob would be elected every week, we'd all wait at the bulletin board for the drawings to come down because the annotator would do 8.5 by 11, sometimes freehand, sometimes really elaborate, really skilled drawings, kind of one frame cartoons, kind of like The Far Side, like capturing whatever that moment was. And those cartoons, they were legendary. And they were compiled in our historian book. So it was just, one of these things that, we built these traditions living in this house with all of these guys. I mean, goodness, of the things that could have gone wrong. But we found so many positive things to build and do in that kind of time together. And I'm incredibly grateful for that experience and really for that house because it really was a laboratory of human nature. I learned more about myself, about the world, about fellow humans at Bradley than anywhere else that I've ever been. I mean, forcing people to get along and do those, daily living things. This house was old is an understatement. Dirty is an understatement. I mean, fraternity houses are dirty, but this one was wow. And I gotta say, there was no privacy really, but at the same time, there was like the most wonderful connections to our brothers. It was very strange because no outsider would understand it. Nobody would see why you wanted to live there and pay that rent. But when you were there, nowhere else felt like home. And at the same time, kind of for me, when all of this was going on, I was involved on campus and I was student body president at the same time. And having this group of brothers at the house and being on top of student government, it made us feel like, on top of the world, honestly, for me. And at the time, Bradley, the student body president, got to also serve on the board of trustees, which at a private university is kind of, it's a nice honor. It's really like stepping into that first experience that the IBAs get on the executive committee. Like I've never run a board. I don't know how to run a corporation. And at the time, the chairman of the board of trustees was a Bradley SIG as well. So it was just like, here I am. I kind of got this in. I already feel fabulous, right? And he is somebody who's Rex Linder, who's just an amazing person. And he ended up giving me my first job as a 1L summer associate back at Peoria at his law firm. So it's, you find these connections and you just, it's almost like, pinch me, is this real? Like the world that Sigma Chi has gotten that I am a part of, like, is this really happening? And, looking back, I joked at the beginning, but it's been 20 years. I mean, there's almost a nostalgic quality to it now. You're all so fresh out of it. I hope it doesn't feel dreamlike yet, but I look back and I say, wow, like I'm so glad we were safe. I'm so lucky we were safe for everything we did. I mean, the other thing is times were completely different, and I don't mean to feel like I'm putting my age out there, but like Facebook had just started. Like Bradley had been invited to be one of the schools that was sampling Facebook. So like we didn't have the same pressure. We weren't online in the same way. I know I'm dating myself because my freshman year at Bradley in 2002, they put out a Facebook. Like freshmen submitted a headshot and the bio, and they ran a book that every freshman, like, hello, like, we were still on the analog version at Bradley days, and in some ways that made our connection closer. In some ways, like we lived more moments with each other not in our phones, not worrying about what the pictures from tomorrow might look like. And I just can't imagine that today. I mean, one of the other things I was mentioning, Bradley, we're so small, and this was like 2004, because the Sigma Chi chapter house was so close to the quad, and because we were like good intentioned young adults with a lot of time on our hands, we rigged a way to broadcast wireless internet from our fire escape towards the quad. Now, this was a big deal in 2004 because, like, not even the university buildings had Wi-Fi yet. Like, nobody brought their laptops to class. Like, this was not a thing. You still went to the computer lab to do your work, or you sit in your dorm. Maybe you had a wireless card in your computer, but Sigma Chi, if you were a member, you could, lounge on the quad. You could hang out and you could get on Wi-Fi. It was, seemed like the future then. Really felt ahead of ourselves. But, I also look back proud. I just, as a kid, I mean, an absolute kid running an organization as a consul, the affairs of the fraternity were managed with such seriousness. I think because of some of the training we got at the time, LTW, now KLTW, we really did take it seriously. And I'm really fortunate that some of my brothers that I worked with then as undergrads, we did more self-help home repairs than should have been allowed and that house corps should have even known about, right? But now today, some of those guys are the house corps officers. So like shout out to Rob Badeau, my old roommate, who took down plaster walls with me and did all sorts of amateur plumbing in this house. He's now, probably yelling at these kids for destroying the doors and, everything we did as undergrads, and there's just something irreplaceable about that if you let those bonds affect you. I'm lucky today. I have some really strong bonds still with my Delta Rho brothers. I became ordained as a minister so that I could perform the wedding ceremony for my brother, Nick Ulivari. My partner, Caleb, and I, we were out in Thailand for a different vacation, and we found time to visit my pledge brother, Mike Barnes, in Bangkok and hang out with him. My pledge dad, Jim Cogdale, has just been somebody I can count on really since Bradley. He's, there running SCLI now, I think, doing wonderful things. And, I was also really, really fortunate in 2004 to be a Horizons participant. So I got to go, at the beginning almost of that program or in its earlier years. And I met Chris Lestraps during my time. He was an intern during my time in 2004. And that has just started a friendship that's lasted for 20 years. And I'm so grateful for having these people and these influence and the support and the feedback of all of these wonderful people, because they really sculpted those years and in the process sculpted me and who I became.
I think it's so interesting, like the way I've always thought the same thing, and I completely agree with you. The way that you articulate, like how you're in college and you're such a young adult and you're learning, how to live and how to be an adult. And the affairs of the fraternity are so serious, the way that it's managed and conducted. And I always think that even now, like it has such a positive impact on my job and the way that I see other things in leadership. And so I completely agree with you. And I think that's really well said.
Yeah,
Dave,
I mean, we got at one point we got sued by our former chef, and we had back.
It's a lot of issues you deal with. Yeah,
and it's like you're 19. Who do you go to? Who handles this?
Yeah.
And thankfully we had people. We had lawyers and brothers and alums and people who would give you that advice. But yeah, at the time you're like, I can't believe they let me do that.
And all of those experiences build character, though, and they make you, so much more prepared. So absolutely. Dave, question 3 for you.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say I think it's funny you mentioned Chris, because when I went to Horizons, he was my session coordinator, I believe. Love that guy. Still text him from time to time. So the question is,
that's awesome.
Yeah, just tell us a little bit about the experience of winning the IBA award and any memories you might have associated with that.
So I think the thing I remember absolutely the most is the unwavering support of my brothers in that experience. I mean, my chapter brothers, they supported me hand in hand on a lot of the projects that went into my kind of application. And you know, you have to kind of lay out everything you've done and how it works and who the influence was. But really, like, my brothers helped me practice speeches for competition when I had, you know, to work on memorizing 6 different 10-minute speeches for that weekend. And then they greeted the speech team bus when it arrived back at the student center at, you know, 3 o'clock in the morning after a tournament. They were part of the, you know, get out the vote efforts that secured my mandate as student body president. They joined me at the protests that I was involved in. They stood in at phone banks. They staffed food kitchens, you know, the volunteer efforts. Almost everything that I was able to say I was part of or that I got to do was because of the people behind me. And while, you know, that award kind of is for one person, you really can't do it alone. And I was also lucky because Bradley was my home. So my service back was to a place that I already felt really strongly about. It didn't take any convincing. It wasn't like I was at a new school trying to, you know, become the guy on campus. No, this was, you know, like I said, there was a field named after me. I was taking it personally. But the other thing I remember is just in that moment, and you meet these other guys and they're rock stars, and you're like, what am I doing here? Like, I am certain that I did not have the top GPA. I know I did not have the top GPA. I know I didn't go to the most competitive school either. And I just remember that feeling unworthy of the honor and just like, I feel like now there's something else. And I think that's really what I think I've talked to other IBAs about this. There's almost like a duty, like you win, and there's this moment where you're like, it's a relief because it's competition, but it's not, because it's never a competition. And that's the biggest freak out about it afterwards, because then you're like, now this duty is this award rather is a duty, and it's a promise, and it's not just for me, but it does require more. And I think that's one of the most important and maybe inspirational aspects of our order. And it's that feeling, that like almost that spirit that we have a desire to always lift up the lives of others by expecting more of ourselves. So the award, it made me feel lucky, but also obligated to pay it forward. That this is like not something that is mine, but something that is like all of the people at Bradley who put me on the stage that night, because I really wouldn't have been able to do it without my brothers who were there with me.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head there. Definitely, my experience was similar. I'm sure Dave's gonna feel the same thing coming up here, but you know, it really is all about like your mentors, your support system that got you there. Then after you win, there's, you know, major imposter syndrome. Like you see all the guys that were there with you, all the guys in all these chapters in Sigma Chi, and it's like, how was I chosen over anyone else? Like, I think you're right about duty, and that's something that we all feel. I think, that's my perspective.
Yeah, I was so glad there wasn't like a sport or like a physical requirement to it. It was like the 4 dimensions were dimensions I could handle, because like the only thing I was all American in was speech. And if that tells you anything, there's no physical requirement to be an all-American in speech and debate, right? But, you know, like if this award had been like, and you have to be an outstanding athlete, I'd have been like, good night, not going to happen, right? So, you know, I think that's, you know, when you say what it's about, it's really hard to be the winner when the 4 different dimensions are all things that are supposed to be outward characters, right? Your scholarship, your cert, right? So, yeah, I don't know that I will ever feel worthy. I don't know when that actually happens. I'll ask like Keith Crock or somebody if you actually ever feel worthy. Because, you know, I was even lucky, and I digress. I know this isn't one of the questions, but I got to be the lobbyist for Sigma Chi when I was an undergrad. I got to go to DC and help move the bill. And one of the people that they introduced me to was the IBA winner from, I think, 1948, Dr. Ben Fisher. He was a member of the Cosmos Club, which is like a private club in DC that you have to basically be like a genius or like a great mind to get into, right? And I just remember thinking like, we share this, really? Like, and And they picked me, like, really? Like, I can't get into this place. This guy's a genius, man. Right. So I don't think that will ever go away.
And I think that's how it's supposed to be. It's the best way. We'll go into question 4, John. So being an alumni now and everything, how busy you are with your career and all that, how have you been involved with the fraternity since graduating from college?
Well, I was very lucky, like all three of you, to get to join the executive committee. I was never the undergrad rep or anything like that, right? My first kind of big service was after winning the Balfour, and I was lucky because the winner after me, I believe, took a job and couldn't serve part of his additional. It's the current and the one 2-year terms. You kind of staggered, and then the new IBA couldn't accept the position, so they asked me to hold over. So I got to kind of experience an extra year on the executive committee in that role, and the being 19 and sitting in those meetings, you don't expect that your voice is going to carry the same weight as maybe somebody who's been volunteering their whole life, or somebody who's been elected to a grant office. Or I think at the time, Grand Counsel Wilson was the alumni rep, to the executive committee, and all of those folks come with a mandate, and with you have the Grand Praetor rep represents Grand Praetors, and here you are, and you're like, I'm not an undergrad, so I don't represent them anymore, and I've not done anything as an alum, so I don't really represent them either. So you're like, I'm here, and I don't want to be dead weight and dead wood on a board. So I was enamored in learning how to be an equal participant, how to sit at the meeting and not fake it, right? To be, how do you teach someone to be a board member? It's like, it's very hard to do, but I learned from the absolute best, Keith Kroc, and I can't tell you what it was like to Keith and Bob Jones as a team were wonderful together, and so I really got to learn from kind of these Fortune 100 leaders, right? It was like sitting in a true corporate boardroom. I was with Keith Kroc and Bob Jones and Wayne Tucker and Dennis Santoli and Mike Greenberg. I mean, these guys are my Sigma Chi all-stars, right? And I wish more new leaders were able to kind of experience the brotherhood of the executive committee, because that to me was like, wow, this is chapter life, but there's a bit higher stakes because it's every chapter. So I really loved serving on the board. I got a lot of just professional experience, I think, out of that time. A lot of challenge too on how do you drive an organization? How does leadership work? And seeing our grand consuls actually do it and live it is the best lesson. I also have been fortunate to be involved in Horizons, so I am still a volunteer for Horizons. I have not been able to travel that often, unfortunately, so I have taken 3 groups to up the mountain. They are now, it's been about 9 years, so you take a group, then you wait 2 years, take a group, wait 2 years, take a group. So I've done 3 groups over 9 years. And I love the program. I think that's clear. I've served on the Horizons operating board. I still grade the applications and do the selections. So that's kind of how I'm still involved today. I also used to volunteer and go to workshop. I think I told you it was not the Keith Kroc transformative leader program that it is today, but I think that's great progress. I had a wonderful experience. My time at workshop, I actually worked with the Queesters group under, at the time, the direction of Tim Sanderson. So all of the people went on to become amazing Sigma Chi console leaders, right? Like, so there was never, even my time on Horizons with Lauren Butler, like, all of these people are people who've kept their heart in the work and show that, through their continued dedication. And I think that constant drive to kind of support transformational leaders is why our programs are so popular. It's why people want to volunteer. I did step back a little bit just in terms of travel and things. Kind of personally, my dad passed away 5 years ago, and it kind of made me reconfigure maybe where I was spending time. And I have a very large family of nieces and nephews, and I want to spend the time that I can travel and to be with my family. So I've kind of modulated kind of where I'm involved and how I can be involved, but I've tried to stay continually involved in some aspect of Sigma Chi since I graduated.
I think that's so amazing. I didn't know that you were still did the Horizon selection. So that's just awesome to hear. And you talked about keeping your heart in the work. Like all of those names that you've mentioned, like Grant and I and Dave soon will be like so intimately familiar with, and that never changes. And I think that's one of the coolest things about, what the fraternity brings to bear and the people in it. That is always a constant. So absolutely agree with you. I'll pass it to Grant. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, I also think it's really cool how like almost 20 years apart, like I 100% relate to what you were saying there about being on the executive committee. Just that duality of like being young and like trying to figure out what's going on, but also having everyone like look to your opinion and respect what you have to say. It's something that takes a lot to get used to. Then also that brotherhood that you feel in the EC. It's not like an impersonal board. It's actually like, brothers together trying to make values-based decisions for the fraternity. So I think that was very insightful, definitely. Let's move on to the next question. So what role did the ideals and principles of the fraternity play in your life, and how have they impacted you in your work life and as a man?
Wow. I was thinking about that one. They've remained a guiding force in my life, our principles. And I'm not just talking about, like our great aims or even our 7 values. There are other principles at stake that I think you learn when you share your heart with anybody. I say this because as I've gotten older and as I've moved away from the Midwest, right, I think it's become more important and I've noticed it more. So I will say one of the things where the principles have played a bigger role in my life and that I try to do a better job is when I moved away and I moved out here, I didn't know anybody initially out here really at all. Like, it was law school. I was just, you don't need to know anybody. You just got to go to the library. And right away, like I found a connection with the local chapter and Bill Sapo out here in New Jersey really just welcomed me, brought me into the fold, helped me get involved, introduced me around. And like kind of in the larger world and kind of in New York City, where I like to kind of, you can both be like completely alone and in the middle of a huge crowd in New York City. It's such a wild feeling. But in that world, that like large anonymity, I really found myself thinking about Lockwood and the idea that, to know somebody is a Sigma Chi is to know that he is, liberally educated, high-handed, pure, and noble, and that, we should go forward and be those men. Being new and in this new place, meeting Sigma Chi's and seeing that in real life, that Lockwood quote in real life, people I had never met before, but when I encountered them, when I learned a little bit about their story and we put together that we shared this Sigma Chi connection, it was like, oh, yeah, now I get it. Now I kind of see. So the fraternity's values, they've always played a role, but I think more so being away from home as a new lawyer, they played an even bigger role because I found members of the bar who were lawyers. I was set up very fortunate. Our wonderful historian and former Grand Consul Doug Carlson was a close friend of mine, and he came to New York kind of a lot, and he introduced me to, again, more people that were his friends and set me up with a mentor out here who was a lawyer who would just meet with me just to say, how's it going? What connections are you doing? Are you doing this? How's work? What's new? And you don't know it at the time, because at the time it was like a guy taking me to dinner or out for drinks or just, being friendly, just, staying on my radar. But I met up with Doug one night. He was in New York and we went to the Palace Hotel together. The Palace Hotel is Whitlaw Reed's family home, right? And we went there to have an adult beverage together and to catch up. And, Doug was an amazing history buff and he could find something secret almost anywhere. Well, sure enough, he knew that he could go from this hallway in the Palace bar to the secret part of the house and we could go to the family library. So one night we went to the library together in the Palace Theater or the Palace Hotel. And Doug, I had this photo of him. It's one of these old libraries where you had lights on cords that you carried with you down the stacks because there were no lights in the room. So you actually carried a lit light with you. And I have this picture of Doug holding the torch, this light, and it's illuminating his face. And we're there because we're translating a Latin phrase on the wall together. And it was a phrase, I think it was from De Amicitia. It was on friendship, right? And I think about that because there was so much of Sigma Chi, of friendship, justice, and learning just in that moment. He to me was literally bringing this light of knowledge, this torch, this friendship, forward, and for nothing, just because that's what Sigma Chi's do, because you always will help out or reach up or connect with it's what we're supposed to do. So, I have benefited so much from this literal passing of the torch, this knowledge sharing and friendship together, that when I think about what's important for me now as somebody, a lawyer, and what matters, I do think back on our values. I do think back to what I was saying about integrity being a corporate value where I work, and whether I could ever do a job that I didn't believe in. So Sigma Chi has maybe made me hard to employ. I don't know, because truly I believe that when your heart is in the work, like we know, right? Like it changes how you feel and how you do those things. And I credit the ideals and principles for our fraternity for really bringing that to light, for passing that on, and for really being the example that I kind of look to. I tried private practice. I liked it. I was good at it, but I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel like I was doing the right thing. There was something in Sigma Chi, and maybe in this idea of being a servant or a leader for others, that there's more to it than money and riches, right? You have to feel good about what you're doing. So I think about just being so incredibly lucky to be liberally educated and high-minded and a Sigma Chi, because those values are what has paid off so much in my life going forward.
I don't know if you have any idea, John, like how amazing these answers are, like how well you can embody like what a Sigma Chi means and how to take that into your career and how to live your life in such a way that we're all striving for. Like it's just articulated so well. So thank you for the answers.
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to say I couldn't agree more with the meeting Sigma Chi's out and about. I know since I got initiated throughout undergrad, and then even since winning this award, we were talking about this before the show started, but met a previous IBA winner recently just randomly at a grocery store here in town. And all the people that I met, even at Kroc after winning the award, all the people I met at Horizons, everywhere that I've gone, they've been some of the best people. So I 100% agree with you on that. So this next question is, how did being selected as the IBA affect your outlook on service to the fraternity? Did it at all change how you saw things behind the scenes?
I'm gonna answer the second part first, because yes, service on that level in the like smoke-filled room, if you will, at nationals, right? Wince, right? Everybody was like, "Oh, nationals." Yeah, that was always the like hiss line when I was in undergrad. It opened my eyes to like an entirely different reality, but it fully secured my faith in our ritual, in our values, and in our values-based decision-making model. Seeing that leadership, like our chapter leadership, like struggle with some of the same things that I remember struggling with myself as a young consul, or with an unwieldy meeting, or maybe even with a resolution that you don't really believe in. It was reaffirming. It was so nice to see it under the lights, because I had the same belief, maybe jaded, that other undergrads did, that it was kind of different, that it was more of a business, that it was more about numbers or rankings, because when you're in an undergrad and you're sitting in that seat and your fraternities are almost competitive. You're you're not thinking of them like organizations and like the breadth of their service and, you know, whether they're endowed or whether their, you know, foundations are doing good things with the funds, right? Like those are not the thoughts that the undergrads are having. So kind of reaffirming in a way that I expected to see how the sausage was being made, and I was like pleasantly surprised when it was like the Stradivarius, you know, violin factory, and everyone was taking great care and, you know, craftsmanship, and it wasn't this just like printing more badges kind of belief, because I think even at the time fed into it by what was happening in pop culture. You know, it's not exactly been popular to be in a fraternity, and I know that's been kind of a moving target for a long time in society for different reasons. But to that first part of this question about being selected affecting my outlook, it did affect my outlook on service, but because I believed we had an opportunity to change who we were globally as fraternities. So when I mean, it's hard to think back 20 years, but absolutely it changed my outlook, because before I won the award, Sigma Chi had just suffered a great tragedy. Blake Hammondtree had passed away pledging at one of our chapters in 2004. At Bradley, my own school, a member of another fraternity died on our calling out night. He also died of an alcohol-related incident. And those tragedies, to me, were not true reflections of my fraternity experience, but they were painting a picture nationwide and worldwide that we all kind of got painted with the same brush when it wasn't, you know, it was awful. The reason it changed my outlook, though, wasn't just the tragedy. It wasn't like just this idea that I had to go prove that Sigma Chi wasn't like that. I was sent to Oklahoma at their rechartering in 2006 as the IBA to go see what was happening, to give a readout on what was happening at that chapter. And meeting with those brothers who themselves were just 2 years like from tragedy, it changes everything about why we do this. And I am so grateful that Sigma Chi as an organization took the lead at that moment, that we kind of were able to take not just this tragedy, but we were able to start to build some of the support services that I think were missing from fraternity life and missing, like the mental health service, like the Lifeline for SIGs, right? All of those things were started out of some of these tragedies, but out of a desire to prove that our values actually are what sets us apart. So it was an interesting time to come into kind of international service as myself too, because I was also grappling with who I was at the time. And, you know, I certainly was not sure that Sigma Chi or any fraternity man, you know, as it was known at the time, was something that I fit into. So I think it really made me think about Sigma Chi differently when I saw how we reacted and how we came, you know, to treat the needs of our own brothers. And I think about that because it's one of these things that, you know, you're like, what's a mark of a good civilization? And like, when did civilization start? Like, what's the point that we can say that, like, you know, we put these values above like pure animal instinct? And I was reading this really interesting story, and they said, you know, we have all these tools and all this evidence that, you know, humanity started all these times ago, but the earliest indication of people caring for each other, for when you can say society or humanity started, is in a million year old fossil that had a healed broken femur. Because at the time, if a leg was broken, no one was caring for you. There was no society set up for you. So that we have fossil evidence that people cared enough, you know, to mend a broken leg, to stay with someone while they were ill, to build that person back to health. That's when we say, you know, humanity started. And I look at kind of how Sigma Chi and our own brothers have responded to the kind of the scourge of underage drinking, of hazing, of sex assaults, of you know, the fact that we can't talk about sexuality or gender or suicide, and we have taken it as a challenge to do better. To me, it has changed my entire perspective on what it means to be a fraternity man and what it means to be a Sigma Chi. And I'm really grateful that we're kind of leading there. I'm sorry that it came from tragedy, but I'm glad we're stepping up as an organization and letting our values speak for themselves.
I completely agree. And I think too, like a lot of those problems, you know, have stayed the same over the years. And we continue to be, you know, at the forefront of change and of doing the right thing and of setting that standard and example, you know, that we so desire. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I'll just kind of echo that, and kind of going back to the first question that you answered there, kind of like an undergraduate thinking about the EC, they're really like, how's this sausage made? What's going on? But it really is just leading by example. It's using the same principles and the same values that that chapters are using in their decisions. It's the same thing in the EC. The decisions can be for things that are, you know, a little larger and more far-reaching, but it's the same practice that they have as undergraduates. So I think that's 100% spot on.
John, I guess we'll move into our last question. So I think one of the most important ones, and you've already said so much that would be so helpful for undergraduates, but what advice would you have for Sigma Chi's coming out of college today? And what are some lessons you've gathered since graduating from college that would be helpful? You've already talked so many of them, but any other ones?
Absolutely. So I think it come from curiosity, not judgment. And that's not a Walt Whitman quote. It's definitely taken from Ted Lasso. He said it was Walt Whitman. It's not Walt Whitman. But I like the point nonetheless. Be relentlessly curious. If you are a huge Talking Heads fan like me, I'm a huge Talking Heads fan. I think David Byrne is amazing. Another way to say it is stay hungry, which is one of their songs. I think nothing is so formed for you coming out of college right now. But the world needs a curious mind, and it needs a mind free and innocent and free of judgment, because as I can say, having moved into the space as an adult who now trains other adults, right? People don't always come from curiosity, in that they struggle to separate maybe their own judgments or their own biases from how they greet the world. And there is just so much to learn and to do and to appreciate, that we have to find a way to take, you know, whatever may be holding us back, or what might be kind of the apprehensions or judgments that keep us from being involved or asking questions, and really get rid of them. I think I'm heartened. I have a nephew starting college in the fall. He's going to go to UW Eau Claire. I'm really heartened by his generation, because they don't seem to deal with some of the same questions that my generation was dealing with, about like who we are and how that plays out relative to their friends. I think I'm really feeling confident that the generation in college now knows more of who they are than maybe my generation knew, or maybe they're less susceptible to the social media influence because they've had it their whole lives. But to me, you have to stay hungry. If you are finding yourself not liking, dreading, or being bored with what you're doing, that should be like a big wake up call that you need to find something else, because work shouldn't be drudgery, life shouldn't be drudgery. And when you can connect and feel like emotionally and psychologically safe in what you do and what you love, you get so much more out of it. So you know, be curious, stay hungry. For actual college students, I will also say, be present. And I mean that sometimes literally, like go to class, like show up, like go to office hours, go to the lecture series. One of the greatest things that I ever did was go to office hours in law school. It opened doors to me that led to more. My clerkship was because I took an interest in coming to moot court. The fact that I coach moot court is because I took an interest and reached out, right? Yes, you might get assigned more work, but That's really what is going to separate people today. And I say that because I have sat on hiring panels for my company, right? I know kind of like what people are thinking about, but the war for talent is basically over when you're out of college. And the battle for skills is what continues. So who you are and how you show up, meaning like what you're interested in, how you connect with people, the extras you bring are really what's going to set you apart in the world today. So my best advice there, stay curious, be hungry, and show up. That's half the battle right there. For other Sigma Chi advice, I would say probably pay it forward is the only other thing, because one of the coolest things about becoming an active that I remember was I was hanging out with my best friend and her dad, and one day he just like threw me the grip. And like I have been her friend for 20 years and I had no idea that her dad was Sigma Chi. And it was just, it's just like one of those things that like added extra, right? And it was like so amazing, So keep that in mind. You never know when that'll come out.
I think that's amazing advice, just especially about the power of, and how the fraternity also kind of like not forces, but it's like it's inherent, I think, in all of us to pay it forward regardless, whether we realize it or not. And I just think that's so helpful. Grant or Dave, if you wanted to say anything else before we end it here.
I don't think I can say anything better than that. I think that's a great way to end it there.
John, is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, I really appreciate this project and you guys doing this. I'll just say if there's anything to add, it's maybe don't forget how much your example can matter to somebody else. Because you three, and that's what I mean when I say that, is you three might not know how many people, and I learned this now that you have the award, look to you in a way like we look to a grand consul or to one of these leaders. So part of the greatest lessons of Sigma Chi is that like everybody could be that secret Balfour winner out there, but you three, you actually are. But keep that in mind, like you don't understand until you have the experience what even just the 10 minutes that you provide to an undergraduate really means for their experience. It really does. Like it's almost like meeting one of those people, right? One of those names that I'm sure I dropped. But when I was working with all those people, we were just working together on boards. It wasn't even the grand titles never even came into play, So just keep that in mind too for yourselves, that people will look up to you, and that's a good thing. And what you do matters and carries a lot of weight too.
I have to say, this is one of the best conversations about Sigma Chi, if not the best ones I have ever had. And everything you've said, all of your insight, John, has just been so incredible. And so thank you for taking the time to be here. We've been so honored to have you. And I'm so lucky that you were able to make this and then have this amazing conversation.